This is Demon Marked, Book 1 of the Venandi Chronicles, an urban paranormal romance series. Written by Sara Snow. Narrated by Selena Salcido and Henry Shader for Hot Ghost Productions.
Chapter 18. Carter. As I waited for Kingston to answer his phone, I remembered the mutilated body in the park. What if the Cambion, the one I had known as Vince, had been a victim of the same succubus who had abducted Georgia from the bar? The thought of Georgia in the hands of a creature like that scared the shit out of me. "Pick up, Kingston, you technophobic bastard," I muttered. That was the drawback of having a fallen angel as the leader of your team. It had been so long since the fallen were separated from their divine origins that they couldn't grasp modern technology. Kingston knew how to answer a call on his smartphone and how to contact other people, but he didn't appreciate the way communication had accelerated in the 21st century. He would leave his phone in the library to run out of power while he perused ancient texts, or forget to check his text messages and emails when members of the Venandi were desperately trying to reach him. Finally, after 6 or 7 attempts, I got a return call from Kingston.
"How goes the hunt?"
he asked casually, as if I'd taken Georgia out for a bingo tournament. "Not good, Kingston. Georgia and I went looking for the succubus. I left her alone at the bar so I could act as bait. I let myself get distracted by a vamp, and when I came to my senses, Georgia was gone." Kingston paused for a beat.
"Do you know where Georgia is now?"
"She's in the back of a Dodge Charger being driven to her death by the succubus we were hunting."
"Sounds like you made a few tactical errors, Carter. Let's get back on track. Are you following the car?"
Kingston's voice was profoundly calm. "I'm sure as hell trying," I said.
"Which direction are they going?"
"I think they're headed east. Listen, Kingston, I feel like shit saying this, but I set Georgia up for trouble. I didn't mean to, but I put her in harm's way. I don't know if I can live with myself now."
"You're an immortal, Carter. You'll live whether you feel that you deserve to or not. Stop wasting time on guilt and regret, and start thinking about how we can save Georgia."
Kingston was right. Technophobe or not, he was a wise soul. "So what should I do, boss?"
"Keep following the car. I'll have Olympia use a locating spell to find Georgia. Once we figure out where she is, I'll drive to your location. Do you have any iron with you?"
"Yeah, I've got a stake in my pocket." I touched the hard rod just to remind myself that I wasn't as powerless as I felt in this situation.
"Good. If we can find Georgia, we'll find the succubus, and you can kill her."
I hesitated for a second. "I need to tell you something, Kingston. I ran into this succubus 2 weeks ago. Jose led me to her through one of his dreams. She's a murderer, a monster. I almost killed her, but at the last minute I let her live."
"That's the human in you. You're compassionate. Compassion is both a strength and a weakness. Unfortunately, it doesn't serve us well in this situation."
That's not the worst of it. I was hooking up with the succubus at one time, before she committed her soul to evil. I'm afraid she's going to kill Georgia, and not in a very pretty way. Kingston sighed.
"Why am I always the last to know?"
"Everyone in the Venandi tries to resolve problems on their own so that you don't have to worry."
"Look, I may be 2,000 years old, but I'm not some frail old fool,"
Kingston protested.
"I'm still strong enough to slay demons, but I can't help you if you won't tell me what's going on. Their forces are growing. They're gathering their minions to defeat us, and they will win if we're not absolutely committed to destroying them."
"I understand," I said. "Just tell Olympia to call me when she's found Georgia. I'll keep driving." As it turned out, I didn't have to wait for Olympia's spell to kick in. The whirling red lights of cop cars and ambulances directed me straight to the scene of the accident. I pulled off at the side of the road and sat there for a minute, trying to remember how to breathe. A green Dodge Charger, mangled beyond description, had come to rest in the central median. A body lay prone on the shoulder of the road. From a distance, it looked like a doll that had been tossed away by a careless child, its limbs extended at impossible angles. Black hair pooled around the Cambion's pale face. Her eyes stared straight up at the sky, fixed on the moon. Even as the first responders surged around her body, the succubus was moving in on her prey. She crawled through the debris and gore that slicked the asphalt, determined to steal the last breath from her victim. The cops and paramedics meant well, but they were no match for the evil that surrounded them. Hordes of demons, invisible to their eyes, filled the night sky. Their shrieks of glee were deafening. I had to act fast. The succubus would devour Georgia in plain sight and then vanish in a red mist. I jumped out of the car and ran to the scene. Imogen had Georgia by the throat, strangling the life out of her while she tore at her exposed abdomen. The vampire in me remembered how to fly. I sailed through the air, covering the last few feet of asphalt in one bound, and came to rest on Imogen's back. She whirled around to face me, screeching with fury. Her powerful arms and legs clenched around my torso as she tried to wrestle me onto my back. "I never should have let you live, Imogen!" I snarled. I grabbed a handful of her short-cropped hair, pulled her head back, and shoved the iron stake through the hollow of her neck. Blood spurted from her throat. Her eyes bulged in shock. A film formed over her retinas as the life seeped from the human form she had stolen. The sight and smell of that bright arterial blood woke the vampire in me. In the chaos surrounding me, I lost control over my instincts. My fangs sprung out. Imogen's jaw dropped open. She spoke, but the voice that emerged from her mouth wasn't hers.
"Charles of the Shadow Clan,"
pronounced the demon that dwelled in Imogen's body.
"Damn you, and all the ones you love."
I hadn't heard my full original name spoken in over 30 years. Imogen, the punk rocker who'd been betrayed by the supernaturals who'd seduced her, couldn't possibly have known it.
No, damn you.
I looked up to see Kingston standing over us. A golden light rimmed his body, incandescent in the darkness. He raised one hand in invocation.
"I call on the power of light to banish you,"
the gentle angel thundered. The succubus screamed as her body burst into flame. Kingston swept in and scooped Georgia up in his arms, holding her above the earth at a safe distance from the blaze. Within minutes, the succubus had disintegrated into a heap of foul ashes. Smoke clouded the scene as Kingston set Georgia down again, gently, in the path of the paramedics. In the smoke and chaos, the first responders hadn't seen the supernatural confrontation that had taken place. The paramedics lifted the Cambion as if she were made of glass, secured her on a stretcher, and whisked her away from me. Wrapped in a blanket, her arms and legs strapped to the gurney, Georgia stared at me as they lifted her into the ambulance. Her cheeks and throat were smeared with crimson. The red fluid covered her face like a mask, obscuring everything but her eyes. The scent and sight of her blood stoked my hunger even more. If she hadn't been restrained on the gurney, surrounded by human rescuers, I couldn't have stopped myself from ravaging her. My fangs lengthened even more. My upper lip curled back. The human in me couldn't stop that transformation from taking place. It was the last Georgia saw of me that night. A predator, eager to take advantage of her at her weakest, most broken point. Georgia's purple eyes burned holes in my conscience that lasted long after they'd carried her away to the hospital. In that last look she'd given me, her eyes had shimmered with fear. If I hadn't been certain before, I knew now that Georgia recognized me for what I was.
"She's better off now,"
Kingston reassured me as the ambulance doors closed.
"They'll keep her for a few tests and then bounce her right back into our arms. You know how quickly she heals. Those shattered bones are mending themselves as we speak."
His voice brought me crashing back to reality, back to my human self, the self that could still feel guilt and remorse. "I wish I were as confident as you sound," I said.
"I'll follow them to the hospital and wait for the doctors to evaluate Georgia at the ER. She'll be fine by morning, Carter. I'll bring her back to the warehouse after they discharge her, and Olympia will spoil her rotten."
Kingston grasped my shoulder. The warmth of his touch melted the tension in my muscles.
"Trust me," he said. "I'll take care of her."
I was relieved that Kingston had taken charge of the situation. At the same time, I didn't want to lose control over Georgia. It had been hard enough trying to rein her in at the beginning of our training. Now that she recognized her own powers, her sass and snark would go unchecked.